Substance Painter again, but also in relation to just modeling maybe something to show you how quick and easy it could potentially be to model in details. I was toying about whether I should literally attempt to, from scratch, model like a spaceship corridor type thing, then texture it in Substance, and then bring it back into Maya. And I timed myself doing this, and I was busting the hour kind of mark. And I understand that that's as fast as I could go. I understand that an hour might be a little bit too much to sit completely still and look at stuff. So I'll start doing it in Maya, but then I'll skip ahead to a finished model that isn't actually that much more complicated and show you the actual substance of the lecture, which is Substance. Right, so creating, like, say you've blocked out your Mars base corridor or room or whatever like that, and you need some detailing. You need like to make the wall look a bit more interesting. Well, this is one potential kind of way around it. I would start something like this using, I would go to plane maybe, change this to 5 and 5 and 1. Actually, that was too little. I actually want a plane with just 1 and 1. Like that. I'm going to scale it up. I'm going to use symmetry to do some of this. So symmetry works by, well, first of all, I'm going to cut this dead down the middle, like that. I'm going to turn off grid, and I'm going to turn symmetry on. And symmetry is just up here in the modeling toolkit. You have X, Y, and Z. That's which kind of axis it's going to symmetrize on. This object is going to be symmetrized in X. So it means if I select that edge, then the one on the other side moves with it as well. So it makes just life a lot quicker and easier. I'm going to rotate this like this. And the first thing I'm going to do is form this side. I'm going to do it by going like that. And then I'm going to take this one and move it like that. I want this and this to be on the same level, the top bit and the bottom bit at the same level. So I can go into my vertices and snap them. Hold down V, move my mouse cursor just there, so they're snapped now to that level, which is great. Next thing I want to do is build out a little bit more of, I want to do some extrusions. This is how quick this can go, right? So if I go to extrude here, I can move that in, extrude again, move that kind of out a bit, extrude again. I'm going to turn this to slow, have this bit come back up, move that bit like this. And again, this is just, I mean, just hitting the extrude button over and over again and just forming out this kind of wall segment. So I'm going to have a bit like that, a bit like that. And you can keep on going. You can make this as detailed as you want it to be. I don't know, maybe that's the rough kind of wall segment I want. Now I'm going to go in and do some beveling. I'm going to select all of those and bevel it. Give it actually more than the usual kind of segments, because I want a sort of smoothly kind of curving down kind of. I want to mix up the hard edges and the curved edges, because I think that's probably going to look nice if I do that. So I can put more subdivisions here to make it smoother at the moment. So that's the beginning of my wall panel. Again, because I'm doing symmetry, I'm only having to do it to one side. That symmetry can be found just there. You click that, you choose the one you want. You might have to mess around with figuring out what's the actual axes that you need to be symmetrized on. But so I'm just selecting the edges here because I want to make these kind of sharp, but you know, with a little bit of beveling kind of going on. Oh, I've got a double extrusion there by mistake. So bevel it like this. Yeah, kind of liking the look of that. Want that beveled, but nowhere near as much as the top segment. So imagine that just repeated over and over again. You're automatically going to get some sort of visual interest kind of going on. One thing I could also do is bevel down the middle. Switch to face mode. Bevel this in a little bit. Like that. And then I could add extra bits and bobs on top of that. As I said, though, I don't want to carry on. I mean, that took me only a few minutes at most, right? If you spent a bit more time, I ended up spending like 15 minutes, I think, modelling it. I ended up with something that looked like this. Right? So the only thing I did extra on this was when I was doing one of those little side extrusions, when I beveled that particular line, I just beveled it with a load more segments to give me that kind of curved kind of look. This segment here, I just kind of multi-cutted out the shape and then extruded those edges and then extracted those edges to make this kind of, I don't know, weird kind of panel bit just here. These are just a bunch of boxes. All they are just boxes with the central bit pulled in and beveled. And then all recombined. So I selected them all and just went combined. Didn't bother merging vertices or anything like that because none of these objects are necessarily meant to be totally seamlessly. I mean, maybe this bit, but I don't care. These bits can just sort of sit, can float on top. That doesn't really bother me that much. So that's the model. Then I auto UV'd it. So automatic UVs I did, and then I laid it out using the layout tools. It's a cheap and cheerful way of doing the UVs, but it works for this purpose. And then export it as an FBX. So this is what I actually want to talk about, right? The substance stuff and just how to sort of tackle it again in terms of something like this, a bunch of techniques. And a refresher. So new, let's select the mesh. So I'm in Substance Part 2, Panel A. I'm not going to bother changing this at the moment. I will change it when I render it out though, when I export it. So that comes into Substance looking nice and predictable. Remember, the first thing you've got to do with Substance if you want it to work with anything is bake the textures. In this case, I don't want to bake normal because I don't have a higher or low res kind of mesh, so we don't have to worry about that. I don't want to bake ID because I'm not using any kind of ID map at all. Just want to bake all these, but I do want to bake it at a slightly higher resolution. This will just mean that when I apply the smart materials and smart masks and things like that, they'll just have that little bit of extra detail and accuracy. So I'm changing that to 2048. And then I'm going to hit Bake Lambert 1. So hopefully it shouldn't take too long. Excellent. Okay. So there are all our maps that just got created. Now this is how I think you should tackle stuff in Substance. I mean, this is all one object, but it's made of a bunch of different objects. You should look at it and go, what are the roughly different materials that I'm going to want to make? And I'll tackle them one by one. And I won't move on to the next one until I'm reasonably happy with the first one. And I'll also show you how I arrange it in here. So I'm going to start off looking at this main kind of panel just here, this main panel. I'm not going to do the border bits, I'm not going to do the detail bits, just going to be these flat kind of curved kind of panels. And I figure I want to make it almost actually the same color that it is at the moment, a kind of white kind of plastic kind of look to it. I'm going to create one fill layer. I'm going to get rid of this default empty layer here. I'm going to call this Paint, and I'm going to call it Paint Rough. This is going to be the rough part of the paint. So a fill layer just flood fills your object with a color, but it also flood fills it by default with some height, some roughness, some metallic, and even some normalness. I'm going to click off the ones I do not want. So I don't want to do anything to do with height, and I don't want to do any normal, and I don't want to do any metal. This is going to simplify things. So now I'm only looking at the color and how rough this thing's going to be. I quite like that kind of color. I'm going to leave the color as default, but I'm going to make it quite a bit rougher. So if I look at the viewport, I can see how shiny it looks at the moment. If I increase this roughness, that shininess kind of goes away until it almost disappears completely. I'm going to build this paint out of two kind of layers. One's going to be called rough, and then I'm going to just duplicate it. Control D to duplicate. I'm going to double click into that, and I'm going to call this glossy. It's going to be pretty much identical to rough, except I'm going to pull down the roughness so it becomes more shiny and more glossy. Now remember, like Photoshop, this glossy at the moment is completely going over the top of the rough. If I click that little button, I can see the rough underneath. If I click it back on, I can see just the glossiness because it completely fills it. I am actually going to change the colour a tiny, tiny, tiny bit as well. Like that. To mix these two together, I'm going to need a mask, a black mask. So now there's a black mask in here. That means none of the paint glossy is showing through. Right? We can only see the paint rough. If I right click that black mask, I want to do add fill. I just want to flood fill this mask. And if you click on grayscale, this little box turns up and you can type stuff in here. And I'm going to type in grunge. And Substance is very famous for its wide variety of grunge maps. And if you hover over them, you get a little thumbnail. So I'm going to choose, I might choose this one. Now, it's going to be subtle, but I can see it on my monitor. Can you see that? Because does that show up at all? Can you see how the light now plays across that? Yeah, you can see that on the screen, right? I want you to realise that all that is a glossy version of the paint and a rough version of the paint. But with that, texture controlling what you see. So where it's white, you're going to see the glossy version of the paint. Where it's black, you're going to see the rough. This is a super nice way of creating a very, very nice, realistic kind of, you know, lived-in paint kind of look. Just create a rough version of your material and a glossy version of the material and blend using one of those grunge maps. I'm going to say that that's kind of like the base of this main panel. I want to organise it a little bit better. So I'm going to select both of these by holding Control, clicking on both, and I'm going to do Control G. So exactly like Photoshop, that puts it into a group or a folder. I'm going to rename this folder Main Panel. And I'm going to apply a mask to this folder, a black mask. So again, it's now you're not seeing anything of that paint kind of material I've made, because at the moment the mask is black. I want to organize these things into folders because I want to make my material in the folder, and then I want to use the folder itself to apply it to the parts of the object that I want. This is black, so it's not being applied to anything at the moment. Now you could just paint into this. So where you'd paint white, you would start to see that material start to show through. Right? Can you see that there? But you can also flood fill this with specific parts of your geometry. Again, I guess it's easier to show. So I'll right click here and I'll go to add paint, not fill, sorry, paint. Now this little button here, polygon fill, when you click that, you get a little wireframe of your model, and you get these different options here. You can fill by UV chunk, mesh fill, which is going to come in handy later when we want to do all of these little blocks here, because these are even though they're all part of the same mesh, Substance, because this model came from a bunch of different meshes that were combined, FBX and Substance can still recognize that this is a different mesh, so you can just flood fill that. But I want this one here, polygon fill. I click that, and now any polygons I select are going to be filled with white at the moment. So it's going to fill this mask with white. If I put that slider down to black, it's going to flood fill it with black, and you're not going to see any of this paint. Again, easier to show you. So that's at 1. And I can just drag a rectangle over the polygons I want to get that paint kind of texture. Another thing actually. Substance has symmetry as well. So this little button up here, click that on. That shows you the plane, like the mirror that's going to happen. So I don't have to try and do both sides at the same time now. I can just concentrate on one side. Do that. And make sure that I've got these bits in the crevices just here. Oh, it looks like I did. Okay, so that's that side done, and you just click back to the brush. So now it's a bit hard to see in a way because the colours are almost identical, but hopefully you can see that the texturing part is only on these panels and is not on any of the other parts. It's going to become more obvious in a moment. So that's I'm going to call that main panel. For the next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to use a smart material. And there's a really nice one in here for all techie kind of things. And it's one of these gun matte materials. I think I really like this one just here, steel gun matte. So I'm going to drag and drop that at the top. Everything becomes that material. It uses the edge detection really well on this one. I'm going to change the name of this though to borders. I'm going to add a black mask so the gun material goes away, and I'm going to switch my symmetry back on, that button there, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to add a paint, going to just here, and I'm just going to select all of these. Like that. And I could be super neat and make it go to these edges. Right. So that's going to be my second material here. Back to brushes. It's coming along already. Now I want to show you Substance Share. Maybe some of you have used it. Substance Share, if you type that into Google, is the algorithmics sharing materials kind of website. So you've got all of those preset materials that come with Substance, and you get a fair decent amount. But then you've got literally, like, I think thousands and thousands of materials that people have made themselves and then uploaded to Substance. And they're broken down into things like materials and smart masks and smart materials and stuff like that. Let's go into materials and let's go to sci-fi. And I already decided I really like this one just here. So I'm going to click that. Little description about it. Shows you how it kind of works. We're just going to go download. We need to find that folder. So there it is, just here. I'm going to cut it, and I'm going to take it into my actual Maya project, so I know everything's in the right place. Source image, paste it, and then I'm going to extract it here as well. And this is the file you want here, this Substance Archive. Now you should, actually, yeah, we can load it in. I tried dragging and dropping it earlier and it didn't work. So it worked better when I did it as import resources. So I can add a resource. And I want this one just here. And I have to tell Substance what it is. So this undefined, click that, and I have to say, well, this is going to be a base material. And I want to import it into just the current session. If you do it current session, it means when you shut Substance, it won't be there when you come back. If you add it to shelf, then it's always going to be there. If you add it to project, then it will be there when you're working in that particular project. Let's just do current session. Import. and it's going to appear in the materials part just there. So again, I need to add a new fill layer. I'm going to immediately group it and call that orange metal. And actually, I'm just going to drag and drop this into here. So the whole thing becomes that orange metal. So you can get rid of this old one just here. Add a black mask. Add a paint. Go back to this little button. And now I'm going to select this bit here. Like that. And all these as well. Okay, there's that side. Oop. This is a bit where I did a bit too much, so if I go to black, I can click those ones that accidentally got selected. Back up to white. And do these. Like that. So that's what it's looking like at the moment. Not too bad. So this is orange metal. Now I'm going to create. I'm going to quickly do the kind of border bits just here. I'm going to create two materials. I want a sort of shiny, dark plastic for one part of it. So I'm going to go new fill. Click that, so it makes all like this. And I actually want this to be quite a bit darker. Something like that. I'm going to group it. Call this dark glass. Add black, and again, same old, same old. Add paint. But this is a situation now where, actually no, it's actually you'll see in a moment. So add paint, go into here, got my polygon selection, just want to select these bits. Not that bit though. I'm going to have to switch symmetry off actually, it's getting confused because I'm now applying it to parts of the object that aren't symmetrical. Take that back off. To here. 1, 2, 3, like this. Okay, that'll do for that. And then I want another smart material actually. There's a kind of, where is it? It's like a painted, steel painted, yeah. That's going to go up there. Black mask. Paint. I'm still in that tool. This time I can go to this object just here, this little icon, mesh fill. So I can just click the whole thing and it's going to fill that in. I will have to go back in and reassign that central bit here black, but the same thing here. So that can be quite handy. So go back down to black, bring these back like this. Oh, I'll switch symmetry off. That's actually a good job. And then that one, that one, that one, that one. Okay, so I've got kind of the base colours that I want for this. Now I want to add some actual details. And I've got them these, I'm just going to put this as sort of panel frames. This is how I'm organising it, right? So each one of these groups is a different material. So if I want to start adding some techie kind of material to the main panel, I want to make sure I'm doing it in the main panel. So I'm going to go to paint glossy. I'm going to add an empty transparent layer. Hard surfaces, these are all the normal maps. This is one way that you can generate detail that looks like you modelled it in, but you didn't actually model it in. So let's call these vents, because I'm going to use this to put some vents in. I only want to paint with normal, so I don't want to paint with anything else. So I'm going to click off everything else here. So this is where I'm going to drag and drop my pattern into this normal. So I'm going to look for a kind of vent, air venty type thing. Did find one earlier that was quite nice. Ah, yeah, this is the one I was using. Yeah. So if you drag and drop that onto here, I'm now painting with that. It's got a soft kind of edge because it's still got this alpha on the brush. If I could just get rid of that, I've got a sharp edge to it. If I hold Control and use the right mouse button, I could change the size, and Control and the left mouse button, left and right, sorry, up and down, rotates it like this. But I want this to actually be bang on, kind of that kind of look. And I'm also going to switch it from perspective to orthographic. Can you see? It looks... Orthographic's going to let you paint stuff more accurately, dead on. If you're in orthographic, you can still rotate around it, but it's like you're looking at it in a kind of old isometric kind of video game kind of way. And if you hold down Shift while rotating it around, it snaps to one of the kind of orthographic views. But this means I'm going to be able to paint on here with a bit more precision. A lot of these hard surface maps here also have little options. So you can change it from a grid to a fence or to blades. I'm going to use blades actually, I think. And you can change the overall height. So there's a bunch of options here. I'm adding it onto its own separate layer here so I can change how intense this looks. So I'm going to go here and I'm just going to tap it once. And then I'm going to tap it again just here to add these vents to the bottom edge, just like that. With normal maps, you can apply a filter to them. So this is my vents to make it integrate a bit better, to make it look like maybe these vents are metal and they're kind of wearing away at the paint. If I want to do that, I hold down, I click vents, I select vents, and I go to add filter up here, or add effect. Add filter, little empty filter. Click on the side. Got a bunch of ones here, and this is the workhorse of them. Matte FX Detail Edgeware. Click this on, and it's going to add a load of gunk and sort of scuff marks around where your normal map goes in a semi-intelligent kind of way. And if you want to, you can go in and you can change the look of the material that's showing through. So there's a bunch of settings here. So do that on vents. If I think those vents are too extreme, like there's too much of them, like Photoshop, I can change the blending amount of it. But the difference is that in Substance, you've got base color, height, roughness, all broken into their separate layers. If I change the amount here, the slider on vents, you're still going to see it. You know, it's not going to have that much of an effect. It's not going to have any effect on the normal or the height information. I'm going to have to actually go to here and go normal to have an effect on that. Now I can make the height of it disappear. I mean, I've got edgeware on, so it's showing up. You'd have to adjust them both simultaneously, or not simultaneously. You'd have to adjust them both. Right, so that's vents, but now I want to add in some extra kind of little bits and bobs. So I'm going to create another new empty layer. I'm going to look for some sort of screws and things like that. I'm going to use this one just here. So it's a bit big at the moment. So I'm going to shrink that down and put one just here. I'm going to rotate that. Like that. Another one just here, I reckon. And another one up there. And I'm going to rotate that around the other way. There. Another one to match up with. Like that. I can add some more stuff as well. I'm going to add another layer. And this time I'm going to put some of these little mini vents just here, actually. So I might shrink these down.